So, a listener of mine named Sarah sent me a newsletter she received from a Mark Warner, who's a Democratic senator from Virginia. And the subject line read, quote, "The childcare industry is in crisis. I want to do something about it." End quote. His newsletter was essentially a plea for support, obviously, and a push to expand the child tax credit, which, for those of you who don't know, is an allowance given exclusively to employed parents. In other words, it works as an incentive to have both parents permanently in the workforce and against those families for whom one parent is home. So I'm going to read just 2 paragraphs from this newsletter that went out. Again, his name is Mark Warner, a Democratic senator from Virginia. It is abundantly clear the child care industry is in crisis. Providers are stretched thin, especially as expanded pandemic-era funding is running out. Too many middle-class families are struggling to find affordable, accessible care. This is not a fringe issue, and it's definitely not a women's issue. It is a moral and economic imperative for America. Kids deserve high-quality care. Families deserve choice, freedom, and flexibility. And our economy relies on a fully functioning child care system so that parents can return to work. Plus, dollars invested in early child care can pay dividends. When kids get strong starts, it reduces the strain on our education and justice systems down the line. For one thing, I love how we describe the need for babies to be separated from their mothers and placed in group care as a moral imperative. That speaks volumes right there, but that's what he called it, a moral and economic imperative for America. He then said, when kids get strong starts, it reduces the strain on our education and justice systems down the line. And he's absolutely correct that kids needing a strong start. The question is, what constitutes a strong start? That's not even debated. It's just assumed by the way it's phrased that a strong start means, again, separating babies from their mothers and placing them in group care. This is somehow going to help children rather than hurt them. It's all in the language and the way that it's presented. It's like there isn't even a window that allows somebody to present alternative thinking to what he's putting forth. It's expressed as though it's a given. And for the record, it isn't exclusively Democrats who either lie, which is what they're doing, or who are horribly misinformed about the needs of young children. I mean, it could be the latter. It might be the latter, or we're dealing with liars. But Republicans toe the line as well. So it's not really, it's not a bipartisan issue. I wish it were. But I will say that most writings that are this emphatically pro-child care do tend to come more from Democrats and women's groups. Regardless, neither party has the courage to take a strong stand on the true needs of children because, for one thing, they don't know what those needs are. I believe that. And 2, they would lose too many of their constituents if they did acknowledge that. The most Republicans will do is ignore or downplay the issue, whereas Democrats tend to proudly push policies that get mothers out of the home and into the workforce. They consider that because they consider women's desires to be more important than children's needs. They proudly push for that. But this does nothing, of course, to help the average woman today who wants the option to be home with her baby. Between her employer offering her more money to get her to stay, that's a big thing today, and incentives from the government, like this gentleman, to keep her employed, women with children get zero support for staying home in the early years. Literally everywhere they look, their parents, the media, the government, sometimes their own husbands, women are encouraged to be workhorses when what they really want is to slow down and build a life that revolves around family. In the same vein, an Insta reel was posted this week from the Female Quotient, which is a feminist organization, with a post that read the following, quote, "The cost of childcare in many countries keeps women out of work. For families that are headed by a divorced parent or in households of color, that price of childcare is more than a quarter of the family's income, up to as much as 60% of the total household income. That's just not sustainable for families. Parents, and especially mothers, often face a choice: work fewer hours or leave the workforce altogether." End quote. Note that they hone in on divorced and low-income parents, but remain silent about married parent households. I don't disagree that divorced and low-income parents need options. I think most people would agree with that. But the only way those folks are going to have options is if married parents and even stay-at-home parents, which is apparently now a thing, stop using daycare. Daycare was never designed to be a babysitting service for just any old family who wanted to use it. It began as a Head Start program designed specifically for divorced and low-income families. But it ballooned to become available to just anyone who wants it, and that's when the quality changed and when the costs went up. Ever since then, we've been looking for a way to make daycare more affordable and high quality, and this is 100% impossible to do. The number of families using it is just too big. Those options for divorced families or lower income families would be greater if married parent families, I want to say that right, care for their own children and stay out of daycare and live on 1 or 1.5 incomes. As noted, child psychiatrist Stanley Greenspan once said, quote, "The only way to improve daycare is for parents to provide most of the care for their children. That way, there will be fewer people using daycare, and perhaps then it could have a fighting chance." End quote.